Shifting our focus now in Sri Lanka, the economic mismanagement is threatening the political stability of the Rajapaksa government. Sri Lanka's entire cabinet has resigned from their posts. This except the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. Amid the most painful economic downturn, the ruling political clan is struggling to resolve the crisis. Aside from the Rajapaksa brothers, all 26 ministers of the cabinet have submitted letters of resignation at a late-night meeting. Legal experts say that for the resignations to be effective, they should be submitted to the President. But here the ministers have tendered the resignations to the Prime Minister. As Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa remains in power, the move only clears the way for President to appoint a new cabinet today. Amid a growing parliamentary pressure against the Rajapaksa family, a government official earlier denied reports that the Prime Minister may step down. The escalating protests have led to fissures within the government. The President's nephew, Namal Rajapaksa, condemned the partial internet blackout. He is among the 3 members of the Rajapaksa family who have resigned, along with Finance Minister. And also the eldest brother who held the agricultural portfolio. A junior party has also hinted it may leave the ruling coalition within a week. The move would not affect the government's survival, but threatens its chances of lawfully extending the country's state of emergency ordinance. A critical lack of foreign currency has left Sri Lanka struggling to service its $51 billion foreign debt. The crisis has also left the import-dependent country unable to pay for essentials. In recent days, diesel shortages have sparked outrage across Sri Lanka. The South Asian nation is facing severe food, fuel shortages of other essentials here. Now, record inflation, crippling power cuts have added to their woes. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa declared a state of emergency on Friday. On Saturday, the government implemented a countrywide curfew after protests turned violent. The nationwide curfew was to be in effect until this morning. The government also lifted a block it had planned on social media platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, and WhatsApp. Now, before the social media blackout went into effect, mass protests had been planned for Sunday. Despite the government imposing a curfew to tackle growing unrest, protesters in Sri Lanka's largest city held numerous small peaceful demonstrations. Hundreds of protesters attempted to march to the capital's Independence Square as well. Troops armed with automatic assault rifles moved to stop a protest by opposition lawmakers. Police used tear gas to disperse the student protesters as well. The crowd engaged in tense standoff with security forces for nearly 2 hours before being dispersed. And for more on this, WION correspondent Dasuni Athoda has sent us this report. Let's listen in.
It has been quite the tumultuous 72 hours here in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka was first put under emergency law, then we just ended our island-wide curfew this morning, and the government has put in strict measures to prevent people from public assembly. Nevertheless, people continued to protest, which led the government last night, or the cabinet of ministers last night, to tender in their resignations. However, people have been quick, especially legal experts, have been quick to point out that the manner in which this resignation was done does not have any legal effect as per Article 47, subsection 2, subsection B of the Sri Lankan Constitution. That's not all. As of right now, we do see MPs within the government sort of starting to voice their protest as people have directed their anger towards them. And in your latest update, we have MP Nimal Lanza, who also represents the Sri Lanka Podu Jana Peramuna, which is the leading party that is led by Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa as well as President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who has said that if the government decides to continue ignoring the people's dissent and displeasure, that 50 MPs will remain independent in Parliament. Now, 50 MPs from the majority SLPP ruling party, and that they will ensure and work towards ensuring that the government will lose its majority in Parliament, which is kind of big news.
As you can see, the troops here were deploying water cannons here to disperse the protesters. This was before the social media blackout went into effect. Mass protests had been planned for Sunday, and this was despite the government imposing a curfew. But to tackle the growing unrest, protesters in Sri Lanka also organized numerous peaceful demonstrations. Now, for more on this, we're being joined by Ur De Silva, former president of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, for further insight. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. De Silva. What is your assessment of the current economic situation of the country and your thoughts on the mass resignations?
Yeah, at the moment, it is very difficult because almost all areas are being covered by the people, and then they are making a lot of protests against the government. So at the moment, government is in a difficult situation to proceed. That is the very reason that these ministers, of course, they have given their resignation to the Prime Minister, and we are expecting a new outcome during the course of the day.
Right, absolutely. Now for that, just for more clarity on this, as per reports, a new cabinet can be appointed today. How do you see the situation unfolding on that front?
It depends on this way. Now, if the ministers have addressed the letters to the president only, it will be lawfully accepted. Otherwise, if they have addressed to the Prime Minister, of course, it is not a valid document. So if those documents are addressed to the president and handed over to the Prime Minister can hand it over those documents to the president, then president should take a decision with regard to that. And it was suggested to have a caretaker government, not the same government appointing different people, but we are considering about a new caretaker government to proceed with, and thereafter for at least 1.5 years, and then we can decide what steps we should take after giving benefits to the people at this stage.
Right. All right, then a curfew also we saw was imposed until this morning. We saw an internet blackout in Sri Lanka as well. What options do you think the government is left with right now to deal with the severe shortage of essentials and unrest in the country?
Government cannot go with this way because they have done a wrong thing by imposing curfew, and then they have implemented emergency regulations. You can't do that in a way that at the moment, because the people are asking important things from the government. So they need fuel, electricity, and then other important things should be provided by the government. So if they are prolonging it, it will be difficult for the people to exist. So for that purpose, they say that the president should go home. But it is difficult to change in a way according to the constitution. If the president is going to resign from the post, then the next step would be the prime minister should be appointed. But unfortunately, prime minister also cannot go there because he has already completed 2 consecutive years, consecutive appointments. So then the next step would be the speaker. I don't think it is proper to have that type of a mechanism. Instead of that, if we are in a position to call for a caretaker government appointed by the parliament, then of course it is easy for the people to get their benefits through president.
All right. And now also, who and what do you think is to be blamed for this crisis? What do you think the government could have done differently?
Now we can't talk about the past. They had a lot of options, but they have not adhered to those things. Now what they can do is they can appoint appropriate people to the caretaker government to do essential things and needy things, and then only the people with that will get the benefit. You can't prolong this. You can't postpone this. But for this purpose, the president should appoint appropriate people, whether they are in parliament or not. If they are not in parliament, the people who have been appointed as list members should be resigned and give the opportunity to the relevant people, to the professionals to come in, and the appointment should be given to them. And only people will be satisfied that they have obtained the crime that they have done past few months.
All right. Mr. De Silva, thank you so much for joining us and your insights on this. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.